Cheer Up Luv in 2017, so 8 years ago now, and it started as a photo series retelling accounts of sexual harassment and street harassment in the place that it happened. I was inspired to start the series by when a man walked past me and told me to cheer up, and that basically ignited all my frustrations and rage about every other kind of normalized harassment that we brushed off in our daily lives. It wasn't like the worst form of harassment I'd ever experienced, but it was kind of like the cherry on top. It was the moment where I stopped ignoring all of these things that were incredibly normalized in our society. And it forced me to kind of confront some things that I'd been ignoring for a while, and also to have some conversations that I'd never had before with my friends, for instance. And so that's the first time that I really kind of broached the subject with my close group of friends. I found that my female friends had very similar experiences, and we kind of swapped stories. And then my male friends in that moment sort of dismissed our experiences and said that they were forms of flattery, and that we were being complimented, and that we were just taking it the wrong way and being oversensitive, etc., etc. And so at that moment, this was pre-Me Too movement, pre any of the kind of conversations and like widespread discourse that we have online around these subjects now. And so it felt quite taboo even having that conversation. And I felt very voiceless in that moment, and like I couldn't really advocate for myself or my friends. I felt quite like disempowered, and unable to form an argument as to why these experiences were valid, and that they weren't compliments, and that they weren't, just kind of attempts of flattery. And so that's when I wanted to do something that would kind of prove a point. And I started taking photographs of my friends initially standing in the place that they had an experience of sexual harassment, whether that was a street, a train carriage, bus stop, wherever it might be, and using that setting to kind of tell that story and let the photos in the stories really kind of speak for themselves.
You've been doing this for 8 years. Do you feel that attitudes have changed, shifted, either positively or negatively, in terms of the way we talk about street harassment, the way we confront it, how prevalent it is?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of swinging pendulum. It's always one year the conversation will feel like it's really progressive and that it's really, going in the right direction. The next year, I feel like we'll be back at square one again. And then, 2 years on, we'll have made some progress. And then another year on, funding will have been cut for a service that is really vital, to survivors. So it's just, yeah, it feels like a constant kind of tug of war, really, with progressing the issue and progressing people's awareness. But I guess the one thing I do think that really has improved is a general sense of awareness around young people, and older people, people of my generation and like above my parents and so forth, about what constitutes as sexual harassment. I think when I started doing this work and I was speaking to people, whether it was on the news or my friends or in my family, this idea of what counted as sexual harassment was something that was really disputed. And that is not so much the case anymore. There still are wider kind of conversations around, consent that need to constantly be had.
From a kind of artistic perspective, I think the photography in the series is really striking. You said the thing about kind of looking straight at you and confronting the story essentially. I guess how did you decide on that approach from an artistic perspective to telling this story?
Yeah, sure. So I really felt like at the time when I started the project, whenever we encountered stories about, male violence against women in the news, quite often the subjects were sort of anonymized, or they would be facing away, or they would be, shrouded in shadow, or, it could just be like a black silhouette or something. And I felt that there was this lack of connection there where you're reading this, really horrible story, and, for good reason the person doesn't want to show their face. That's like completely understandable. But I felt that there was this sort of disconnect maybe with how we processed, how we processed quite difficult stories and subject matters, especially when reading them in the news or reading about them on our phones. And there's a kind of disconnect and perhaps becoming desensitized to reading like horrible things because we can't identify with the human being behind the story, and we don't know who it's happening to. And so I think that's quite like a natural thing when you're confronted with so much media or scrolling on your phone the entire time, naturally your brain kind of has to disconnect from it because it's just like too much, too overwhelming, too stimulating. And then for, as I said before, very understandable reasons, the people in the stories themselves might not want to have their face attached to it, and that's completely understandable. But I wanted to kind of try a different approach where I could get people's attention, get people to kind of stop scrolling and look for a minute, and also be able to see these kind of these identifiable locations, such as, and these really normal everyday surroundings, places that you walk past every single day, bus stops, train stations, places that are kind of like, oh, I know that place, or just to kind of reinforce that this isn't extraordinary. This is really, unfortunately, ordinary, and it happens every single day to, millions of women and people of marginalized genders, like all around the world, to be honest. The landscape at the moment is quite bleak, I would say. I can understand if people are feeling really unmotivated by this rollback in rights that we are seeing around the world. So I guess I just want to let people know that, any kind of action that you take, big or small, does have a really big impact and it does make a difference. And, you know, like times are tough at the moment, and I could definitely see a lot of activism fatigue, especially in my sector and even amongst myself. I started the year really burnt out and feeling really exhausted by the world, and just wanted to know, like, let people know that that is really okay. Like when times are tough and we're feeling burnt out, you don't have to be on your top A game every single day, but just focus on the kind of small actions, and those little things add up.